The explosion shook the entire compound, sending dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. Through the smoke and chaos, Staff Sergeant Blake Ramirez could see the problem immediately. The enemy had fortified the administration building, turning it into a death trap with overlapping fields of fire, booby traps, and concealed fighting positions. His assault team was pinned down, 2 men already wounded, the rest taking cover behind whatever they could find. "We need to pull back," shouted Corporal Jake Turner, pressing himself against a concrete barrier as bullets snapped overhead. "That building's a fortress. We can't clear it without heavy support." Ramirez was about to agree when he saw her petty officer First Class Tessa Johnson, their combat medic, wearing the bright blue medical vest that marked her as a non-combatant under Geneva Conventions, was moving toward the wounded with that calm, purposeful stride that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times before. She looked young. At 26, she was one of the youngest operators on the team, but there was nothing uncertain about her movements. She reached the first wounded man, assessed his injuries with practiced efficiency, then looked up at the building that everyone else was afraid to approach. Her HK-417 rifle, an unusual weapon for a medic, was slung across her chest, and there was something in her eyes that made Ramirez's blood run cold, not fear, recognition, like she'd seen this exact scenario before and knew exactly how it would play out. "That building needs to be cleared," she said calmly, her voice barely audible over the gunfire. "Those wounded need extraction, and we can't do that with enemy forces controlling the high ground." "We're waiting for backup," Ramirez replied. "Engineers, heavy weapons." "We don't have time. That man has a severed artery. He's got maybe 15 minutes before he bleeds out, and I can't stabilize him here under fire." She stood up, adjusted her medical vest, and checked her HK-417 with movements so smooth they looked choreographed. "I'm going in." "Johnson, you're a medic. That's not your job." She looked at him then, and Ramirez saw something he'd never seen before in her normally gentle eyes. Something hard and dangerous, and absolutely certain. "I'm also the best close-quarters combat specialist you've got on this team. But everyone forgets that part because they see the blue vest and assume I'm just here to patch people up." Before Ramirez could stop her, she moved, and what happened in the next 12 minutes would become legend. The combat medic who cleared an entire fortified building solo while her team watched in stunned disbelief. But before we show you how she did it, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Because this story proves that the most dangerous operator on the battlefield is sometimes the one everyone underestimates. Now let's get into it. Tessa Johnson had stood in the Navy recruiter's office in her hometown of Portland, Oregon, staring at the poster on the wall that showed a hospital corpsman treating wounded Marines under fire. The caption read, "First there, last to leave." She'd been 20 years old, fresh out of community college with an EMT certification and a burning desire to make a real difference. "I want to be that," she'd told the recruiter, pointing at the poster. "I want to save lives." The recruiter had smiled. "Hospital corpsman is an excellent rate. We need good people in medical. But I should warn you, it's not just bandages and aspirin. Fleet Marine Force corpsmen deploy with combat units. You'll be in the fight, just with a different mission." "I understand. I want to help people when it matters most." What Tessa hadn't told the recruiter was that she'd grown up in a family of emergency responders. Her mother was an ER surgeon, her father a firefighter. She'd learned from childhood that helping people often meant operating in dangerous, chaotic environments. The difference between life and death was often just training, preparation, and the ability to stay calm when everything around you was falling apart. She'd also grown up shooting. Her grandfather had been a competitive marksman, and from age 12, Tessa had spent weekends at the range, learning trigger control, breath management, tactical movement. By 18, she was competing in 3-gun competitions and consistently placing in the top 10 against adults with decades more experience. She had excelled in hospital corpsman training, top of her class in medical procedures, trauma care, field operations. But something had happened during the combat training portions that nobody expected. She had also dominated the weapons qualifications, the tactical movement courses, the close-quarters combat scenarios. At 21, she'd been the youngest person in her class and had outshot everyone, including the Marine instructors. Her instructors had noticed. Johnson, Chief Petty Officer Martinez had told her after a particularly impressive performance on the combat range, "You shoot better than most Marines I've trained, and your movement through urban terrain, that's not something we usually see from corpsmen. You got prior military experience or something?" "No, Chief just grew up around people who took training seriously. My dad always said if you're going to do something, be the best at it." "Well, you've definitely got the aptitude. Ever think about going for specialized training? We've got programs for corpsmen who want additional combat skills." That conversation had led to Special Operations Combat Medic Training, an elite course that taught corpsmen to operate with special operations units, providing advanced medical care while also being fully capable combatants. The course was brutally difficult. With a failure rate over 50%, students had to master both advanced trauma medicine and combat skills that rivaled infantry training. At 23, Tessa had been the youngest person in her SOCM class. She'd also graduated near the top. She could perform emergency surgery in a field environment, but she could also clear rooms, engage targets at extended ranges, and move through hostile territory with the tactical proficiency of a seasoned operator. But when she'd been assigned to her current unit, a Marine Special Operations team conducting counterterrorism operations, her teammates had seen the blue medical vest in her young face and made assumptions she was the medic, the doc, the kid. Her job was to stay back and patch people up when they got hurt, not to get into firefights. They didn't know about her additional training. They didn't know she'd spent 6 months at an advanced close-quarters combat school, learning building, clearing techniques. They didn't know she'd qualified expert with every weapon system the unit used, including the HK-417 designated marksman rifle she carried instead of the standard M4. They just knew she was the medic, young, female, wearing the blue vest. And medics didn't fight. They healed. For 2 years, Tessa had accepted that role without complaint. She'd saved lives, performed battlefield medicine that kept wounded operators alive long enough to get to surgical care, earned the respect of her team through professional medical competence. At 26, she was still one of the youngest members of the team, which only reinforced the protective instincts her teammates felt toward her. But she'd also watched her teammates struggle with tasks she could have helped with, difficult shots, challenging urban operations, situations where having one more skilled combatant would have made the difference every time. She'd stayed in her lane, providing medical support, not mentioning that she could probably have helped in other ways. Until today, until that fortified building became the obstacle between her patients and survival. The building was 4 stories of concrete and steel, windows blown out, enemy fighters visible moving between positions. Intelligence said there were at least 15 hostile combatants inside, using it as a command post for coordinating attacks across the entire region. Ramirez's team had been tasked with clearing it, but the enemy had prepared well. Booby traps at the entrances, machine gun positions covering the approaches, overlapping fields of fire that turned the surrounding area into a kill zone. The assault had gone wrong from the first seconds. 2 Marines hit by the initial burst of fire, the team forced to take cover, unable to advance or retreat without exposing themselves to devastating fire. And now, Tessa was moving toward the building alone, her blue medical vest marking her as a non-combatant, even as she carried a combat rifle and enough ammunition to fight a small war. At 26 years old, she looked impossibly young to be attempting something this dangerous, but her movements showed nothing but confidence and capability. "Johnson, get back here," Ramirez shouted. "That's a suicide run." She ignored him. Her mind had shifted into a different mode, the one she'd learned in special operations training, where emotion shut down and everything became tactical problem-solving. The building was just a puzzle. The enemy fighters were just obstacles. She had the tools and training to solve this puzzle and remove these obstacles. The first entrance was obviously trapped. She could see the wire leading to what was probably an IED. She bypassed it, moving to a side entrance that looked less prepared. The door was locked, but a well-placed kick near the handle broke the frame, and she was inside, weapon up, scanning for threats. The interior was dim, dust hanging in shafts of light from the broken windows. She moved through the ground floor like water flowing downhill, smooth, inevitable, following the path of least resistance while maintaining unstoppable momentum. Every corner was sliced properly, every room entered with perfect tactical discipline, every angle checked before she committed to movement. Despite her youth, there was nothing hesitant about her technique. She'd trained for this specific scenario hundreds of times, turning building clearing from a learned skill into an instinctive art form. Her HK-417 moved with her body as a single integrated weapon system, tracking to threats before her conscious mind even identified them. She found the first enemy fighter in what had been a supply room, clearly not expecting anyone to penetrate this deep this quickly. He turned toward her, bringing his AK-47 around, but Tessa's HK-417 was already lined up. 2 shots, center mass, the suppressor making the rifle sound like a sharp cough rather than a gunshot. The fighter dropped and she kept moving, already scanning for the next threat. The ground floor was clear. She moved to the stairwell, knowing this was the most dangerous part. Ascending stairs meant exposing yourself to fire from above, limited ability to maneuver, restricted fields of view. It was where most building clearing operations failed, but Tessa had trained for this specific scenario. She used a technique called limited penetration, quick movements to landing, immediate coverage of upper angles, never staying exposed longer than necessary. She flowed up the stairs like smoke, arriving at the second floor before the defenders even realized she was inside the building. The second floor was more active. She could hear voices, movement, the clatter of weapons being handled. 5 fighters, maybe 6, spread across multiple rooms. They were preparing for an assault from the main entrance, all their attention focused outward, none of them expecting a threat from inside their own position. Tessa's combat instructor at Special Operations School had drilled one principle into her head: speed, surprise, and violence of action. The enemy can't react to what they don't see coming, and they can't fight back if you hit them too hard and too fast. She hit the second floor like a tactical hurricane. The first room held 2 fighters standing near a window, watching Ramirez's team pinned down outside. Tessa entered hard and fast. 2 shots for the first fighter, 3 for the second, who was turning toward the sound, both down in less than 2 seconds. The gunfire alerted the others. She heard shouts, boots pounding on floors, weapons being readied. But she was already moving, transitioning to the next room before they could organize a response. A fighter burst through a doorway to her left. Her rifle tracked to him automatically, muscle memory from thousands of repetitions taking over. 4 shots walked up his torso as he tried to bring his weapon to bear. He fell backward through the doorway he'd emerged from. Another fighter appeared at the end of the hallway, firing wildly with an AK-47 on full automatic. Tessa dropped prone, letting the wild spray pass over her, then returned precise fire from the prone position. The fighter jerked and collapsed. She was up and moving before his body hit the floor, flowing through the hallway like she'd rehearsed this building 1,000 times. Every movement was economy itself. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just smooth tactical progression through hostile territory. For someone barely past her mid-20s, her tactical maturity was remarkable, her decisions showing the wisdom of someone with far more experience. The second floor cleared, she heard heavy boots on the stairs above, reinforcements coming down from the 3rd floor. At least 3 fighters, judging by the sound, probably armed with automatic weapons and very motivated to stop whoever was systematically clearing their position. This was the moment where most solo operators would have gotten themselves killed. 3-on-1 odds in close quarters, enemy having high ground and initiative, limited cover in the stairwell. Every tactical manual said, this was where you called for backup and held position. Tessa threw a flashbang up the stairwell. The concussion grenade detonated with a crack that rattled the entire building. The fighters coming down the stairs were blinded, deafened, disoriented. Tessa charged up the stairs while they were still reeling, appearing in their midst before their vision cleared. Close quarters combat at this range wasn't about marksmanship. It was about speed and ruthless efficiency. She shot the first fighter twice before he even knew she was there. The second managed to swing his rifle toward her, but caught 3 rounds before he could fire. The third actually got a shot off, the bullet passing so close to her head she felt the pressure wave, but her return fire was more accurate, and he went down hard. 3rd floor cleared. 1 more to go. The 4th floor was command center. She could hear radio chatter, multiple voices, the sounds of equipment being operated. This was where the leadership was, where the enemy coordinated their operations. Taking this floor would decapitate their entire command structure. It would also be the most heavily defended position in the building. Tessa checked her ammunition. 2 magazines left, 40 rounds. Not a lot for what she was about to attempt. She reloaded with a fresh magazine, chambered a round, took a deep breath. At 26, about to assault the most dangerous room in a hostile building, alone, she felt no fear, just focused determination and absolute confidence in her training. Then she breached the 4th floor. The command center occupied what had been an open office space, now filled with radio equipment, maps, computers, and 6 enemy fighters who were very surprised to see a lone operator in a blue medical vest appear in their doorway. The surprise didn't last long. Tessa moved through the room like she was conducting a symphony of violence. First target, the fighter reaching for a radio, probably to call for reinforcements. He went down before the microphone reached his mouth. Second target, the apparent leader, identified by the way others deferred to him, 3 shots center mass. The remaining fighters scrambled for weapons, but they were reacting while Tessa was acting. She shot through their OODA loops, observing while they were still orienting, deciding while they were observing, acting while they were deciding. By the time they started to respond, it was already over. The last fighter managed to get his weapon up and return fire. Tessa felt the impact as a round hit her plate carrier, the ceramic plate stopping the bullet, but the impact driving the air from her lungs. She ignored the pain, stayed in the fight, put 3 rounds into the shooter's chest. Silence fell across the 4th floor. Tessa stood in the middle of the room, breathing hard, her HK-417 still at the ready, scanning for any remaining threats. Nothing moved. The entire command center was neutralized. 14 enemy fighters eliminated. 12 minutes from breach to completion, 1 26-year-old combat medic who everyone thought was just there to patch people up. She keyed her radio. Building secure, sending all clear signal, get the wounded inside for treatment. There was a long pause, then Ramirez's voice carrying a note of absolute disbelief. Johnson, did you just clear that entire building by yourself? Affirmative, building is secure. I need to treat those wounded now. 1 is critical. Copy. We're coming in. Jesus Christ, Johnson. When Ramirez's team entered the building, they found Tessa back in medic mode, blue vest, medical kit open, working on the wounded Marine with the severed artery. Her hands were steady, her voice calm as she talked the wounded man through the procedure, her demeanor completely professional. But around them lay the evidence of what she'd done. 14 enemy fighters down, a fortified position cleared by a lone operator who looked young enough to still be in college, a tactical achievement that shouldn't have been possible. Ramirez stood there, looking at the aftermath, then at Tessa calmly working on her patient, then back at the bodies scattered across 4 floors. You want to explain how the hell you just did that? He finally asked. Tessa didn't look up from her patient. I'm a Special Operations Combat Medic, Staff Sergeant. That means I'm trained to provide advanced medical care in hostile environments. Sometimes hostile environment means enemy fire. Sometimes it means having to remove the enemy before you can provide care. She finished securing a pressure bandage. This man needs immediate surgical intervention. We need to get him to the aid station. Yeah, we'll do that. Ramirez shook his head. But we're having a serious conversation after this mission about why you never mentioned you could fight like that. You never asked, Staff Sergeant. You saw the blue vest in my age and assumed I was just medical. Everyone does. I'm young, I'm female, I wear the medic insignia. People make assumptions based on those surface details without ever asking what my actual training entails. Turner, who'd been clearing the other floors with the rest of the team, came up the stairs and stopped dead when he saw the command center. "Holy, Johnson did all this?" "Affirmative," Ramirez replied, still processing what he'd witnessed. "She's what, 26, and she just—" Turner gestured at the neutralized fighters. "I've been doing this for 8 years, and I couldn't clear a building like this solo. How is she this good?" Tessa glanced up briefly from her patient. "Training, Corporal. Lots and lots of training. I started shooting competitively at 12, got my EMT certification at 19, joined the Navy at 20, completed SOCM training at 23. I've spent the last 6 years doing nothing but perfecting medical skills and combat skills. Age doesn't determine capability. Dedication and training do." Over the next hours, as they secured the compound and evacuated wounded, the story spread through the unit. The combat medic who'd cleared an entire fortified building solo. The young operator everyone thought was just there to provide medical support, who'd turned out to be one of the most tactically proficient fighters in the unit. Back at base, Ramirez pulled Tessa aside. "I owe you an apology. We all do. We made assumptions about your capabilities based on your job title and your age, without ever asking what your actual training was." "I understand, Staff Sergeant. People see a young woman with a medical insignia, and they think that's all I am. But Special Operations combat medics are trained to be full-spectrum operators. We have to be able to provide advanced medical care, but we also have to be able to fight our way to patients, defend our position while treating wounded, and contribute to combat operations when needed. You more than contributed today. You saved lives, both by clearing that building and by treating those wounded under fire. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen building clearing like that. And you're what? Half my age? 26, Staff Sergeant. But I've been training for this specific type of operation since I was 21. 5 years of focused, intensive training in both medical and combat skills. That's a lot of repetitions, a lot of scenarios, a lot of muscle memory built up." The unit's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, called Tessa in for a formal debrief. "Petty Officer Johnson," she began, "your actions today were extraordinary. I've reviewed the helmet camera footage from your team. You cleared that building with a level of tactical proficiency I'd expect from our most experienced assaulters, and you're one of our youngest operators. Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Special Operations Combat Medic Course, ma'am. Then, additional training at the Advanced Close Quarters Combat School at Fort Bragg. I spent 6 months there, learning building clearing, hostage rescue, and urban combat operations. I was 24 at the time, youngest student in my class, but I graduated in the top 5%. And nobody in this unit knew about this training? They never asked, ma'am. I showed up wearing a medical vest, looking young, and everyone assumed that was my only role. I didn't push back because my primary job is medical. The combat skills are supplementary." "Well, they're not supplementary anymore. I'm recommending you for commendation, and I'm also recommending that we revise our tactical planning to better utilize your capabilities. You're clearly a force multiplier we've been underutilizing." The commendation came through. Bronze Star with V device for valor. At 26, Tessa became one of the youngest recipients in the Special Operations community. The citation was classified, but within the Special Operations community, everyone knew what Petty Officer First Class Tessa Johnson had done. The young combat medic who'd proven that age and gender didn't determine combat effectiveness, training and capability did. But perhaps more important than the medal was the conversation it started about assumptions and capabilities, how seeing someone's job title, or age or gender or any other surface characteristic could blind you to their actual capabilities. How the most dangerous operator on the team might be the one everyone thought was just there for support. Ramirez's team dynamics changed after that mission. During tactical planning, they started asking Tessa for input on breaching strategies, room clearing techniques, weapon employment. She went from being the young doc to being recognized as one of their most tactically proficient operators who also happened to be an expert in combat medicine. "It's actually better this way," she told one of the Marines during a training evolution. "People used to give me space in combat because they thought I couldn't fight. Now they give me space because they know I can. Either way, I get to do my job, which is keeping all of you alive." Turner approached her after a particularly challenging training scenario. "Johnson, I gotta ask, how did you get so good at this so young? I mean, I've been in for 8 years and you make me look like a rookie." Tessa smiled. "Consistency and focus, Corporal. From age 12 to now, I've spent almost every day training something, either medical skills or combat skills or physical fitness. 14 years of consistent, deliberate practice adds up. Most people train in bursts. They're really focused for a few months, then they slack off. I've never slacked off. Every single day for 14 years, I've worked on being better at saving lives and protecting lives. That's intense dedication for someone your age. Age is just a number, Corporal. What matters is what you do with your time. I chose to dedicate mine to mastering skills that keep people alive. Some people think I'm too young to be this good. I think age is irrelevant. Competence is what matters." Months after the building clearing incident, Tessa was selected to attend the instructor course for Special Operations Combat Medics. At 27, she would be one of the youngest instructors in the program's history. Her mission: teach the next generation of combat medics that they weren't just medical personnel. They were full-spectrum operators who could save lives both through medical care and tactical proficiency. Her first class of students included both men and women, many of them older than her. She could see the skepticism on some faces when they saw how young their instructor was. On the first day, she addressed those doubts directly. "Good morning. I'm Chief Petty Officer Tessa Johnson. I'm 27 years old, which makes me younger than some of you. I can see some of you wondering if I'm qualified to teach this course." She clicked to her first slide, showing the layout of the building she'd cleared. "Let me tell you about a mission where I had 2 wounded men who needed immediate care, and 15 enemy fighters standing between me and my patients. Let me show you what I did about that, and what it taught me about the real job of a combat medic. Then, you can decide if my age matters more than my experience." As she walked them through the tactical decisions, the room's atmosphere shifted. Age didn't matter. The results spoke for themselves. One of her students, a 32-year-old Marine named David Sullivan, approached her after class. "Chief, I owe you an apology. I saw how young you were, and I assumed this would be a waste of my time. That briefing just proved me completely wrong. That building clearing was masterclass level." "Apology accepted, Marine. And here's the lesson. Never judge capability by age, gender, rank, or any other surface characteristic. Judge by performance, training, and results. I'm young, but I've been training intensively since I was 12. That's 15 years of dedicated practice. Some people twice my age haven't put in that much focused training time." "Point taken, Chief. Age is just a number." "Exactly. What matters is what you do with your time and how seriously you take your training." As she taught, Tessa realized this was where she was meant to be. Not just saving lives in the moment, but training others to save lives in the future. Teaching them that being a medic didn't mean being passive or non-combatant. It meant having the skills to operate effectively in the most dangerous environments imaginable, and teaching them that youth didn't mean inexperience if you'd spent that youth training with absolute dedication. One of her female students, a 23-year-old corpsman named Jennifer Martinez, approached her during a break. "Chief, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. How do you deal with people who assume you can't do the combat stuff because you're young or because you're female? I get both constantly. People treat me like a kid who can't handle real operations." Tessa smiled, recognizing her younger self in the question. "I don't deal with their assumptions at all. I focus on my capabilities. I train harder, shoot better, move faster, and when the moment comes that matters, I perform. After that, people's assumptions don't matter anymore. My performance speaks for itself." "But what if they never give you the chance to show what you can do?" Then you make your own chances. That building I cleared, nobody ordered me to do it. I saw what needed to be done, assessed my capabilities against the requirement, and executed. Sometimes you have to take initiative and prove yourself through action rather than waiting for permission. And here's the thing about being young. We have energy. We heal fast. We can train harder and longer than older operators. Use those advantages. Martinez nodded slowly. Take initiative. Prove through action. Use my youth as an advantage, not accept it as a limitation. Exactly. You're 23. That means you potentially have decades of operational life ahead of you. If you train as hard as you can right now, by the time you're my age, you'll be unstoppable, and by the time you're 35, you'll be a legend. Over the years, Tessa trained hundreds of combat medics, instilling in them the philosophy that medical and combat skills weren't separate. They were two sides of the same mission of keeping teammates alive. She also became living proof that age didn't determine capability, that a dedicated 20-something could outperform complacent 40-somethings, that youth combined with intensive training could produce exceptional results. Ramirez, now a master sergeant, visited during one of her training courses. Watching her instruct, he pulled her aside during a break. "You know what the lasting impact of that building clearing was?" he asked. "It wasn't just that one mission. It changed how our entire unit thinks about combat medics. We actually utilize their combat skills now instead of just treating them as medical support. And it changed how we think about young operators. We don't dismiss capability based on age anymore. You proved both those lessons in 12 minutes. "That's what I was hoping for," Tessa replied, now 29 but still one of the youngest senior instructors in the special operations community. "I didn't clear that building to show off or prove a point. I did it because it needed to be done, and I had the skills to do it. But if it also changed how people think about what combat medics can contribute and what young operators can accomplish, that's a bonus. More than a bonus, you changed doctrine. The medical personnel aren't sidelined anymore. They're integrated into tactical planning as full operators who also have medical capabilities. And young operators with exceptional training aren't dismissed anymore. They're given opportunities based on capability, not arbitrary age requirements. That's a force multiplier we were missing before." 10 years after that day in the fortified building, Senior Chief Petty Officer Tessa Johnson was still the youngest Special Operations Combat Medic instructor in the Navy's history to reach that rank. At 36, she'd saved countless lives through her teaching, trained hundreds of medics who went on to serve with distinction, and fundamentally changed how the military thought about both combat medical personnel and the correlation between age and capability. But she still wore the blue medical vest whenever she deployed with operational units, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It reminded everyone, and herself, that her primary mission was saving lives, not taking them. The combat skills were just tools to accomplish that mission. Important tools, essential tools, but tools nonetheless. The real job, the reason she joined the military in the first place, was to be there when people needed help most. And if being there meant clearing a building full of enemy fighters first, well, she had the training for that too. Training she'd started at age 12 and had never stopped refining. They'd thought she was just a medic, just medical support, just a young operator who couldn't possibly have the experience to handle real combat they'd learned otherwise. The hard way, for some. The enlightening way, for others. Because Petty Officer First Class Tessa Johnson, combat medic, tactical expert, lifesaver, and one of the youngest operators to ever accomplish such a feat, had proven something important. Capability has no age requirement and no job description. The person wearing the blue medical vest might be the most dangerous operator on the battlefield, regardless of how young they look. You just have to look past the vest and the age to see it. 12 minutes, one building, 14 enemy fighters, one 26-year-old combat medic who refused to let anything stand between her and her patients. They'd thought she was just a medic. She'd shown them she was so much more. And in doing so, she'd opened doors for every young combat medic who came after her, proving that medical personnel could be warriors too, that the blue vest didn't mean weakness, that youth didn't mean inexperience if you dedicated that youth to mastering your craft, and that sometimes the most effective fighter on the team was the one everyone underestimated because of their age or their job title. The legacy wasn't just the lives she'd saved or the enemies she'd defeated. It was the changed perspective, the new understanding, the recognition that skills and capabilities mattered more than assumptions about age and job titles. Senior Chief Tessa Johnson, Special Operations Combat Medic, Warrior Healer, Tactical Expert, Teacher, and living proof that dedication starting young could produce exceptional results. The woman who'd cleared a building solo at 26 while wearing a blue vest, and in doing so, changed how an entire military branch thought about the people who wore that vest and about the capabilities of young, highly trained operators. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks is too young to be a threat and just there to help. Until the moment they prove they can do both, help and fight, heal and destroy, save lives and take them, all while being younger than most people expect someone with those capabilities to be. Tessa Johnson had proven it. And neither the blue vest nor her youth would ever mean the same thing again. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to hear more powerful stories of brave women in uniform.